She sat motionless in the defendant's chair, her pilot wings gleaming despite the dim courtroom lighting. Former Air Force Major Diana Sterling faced the tribunal without showing any emotion. The judge's voice carried pure disdain as he looked down at her with disgust.
"You're not a hero, Major. You're just a failure who got good people killed."
What happened next shocked everyone present. She stood up slowly, stepped toward the microphone, and whispered two words that made veteran officers go pale with recognition. If you've ever been wrongfully blamed for something beyond your control, hit that subscribe button. Sometimes the truth has been buried so deep that only the right words can bring it to light. The Edwards Air Force Base military courtroom possessed an intimidating atmosphere that seemed designed to humble anyone who stood before its tribunal. With its imposing wooden panels and polished brass fixtures creating an environment of authority and judgment that had witnessed countless careers destroyed and reputations shattered over decades of military justice proceedings. Major Diana Sterling sat with perfect military bearing in her dress blues, her decorations and ribbons creating a testament to years of distinguished service that most people would never fully understand or appreciate, representing missions and sacrifices that remained classified long after the operations concluded and their strategic objectives achieved or failed. Her hands remained steady on the table before her, occasionally adjusting a small silver bracelet that bore no identifying marks, but held significance that would soon become clear to everyone present in the courtroom during the proceedings that would change everything about how they understood her service record. The bracelet was a memorial piece, containing metal from the aircraft lost during Operation Sunrise, a reminder of the 6 pilots who had died under her command and whose memory she carried with every breath she took since that devastating day when everything went wrong. The court-martial had been proceeding for 3 days, with each session bringing more detailed analysis of the catastrophic mission that had cost 6 lives and destroyed 2 advanced aircraft worth hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money allocated for national defense and technological superiority over potential adversaries. Diana had maintained the same composed demeanor throughout the proceedings, listening to testimony that painted her as a reckless pilot whose poor judgment had led to unnecessary casualties and massive financial losses that would impact military budgets for years to come and affect future operational capabilities in the region. The courtroom itself reflected the gravity of military justice, with its high ceiling, formal seating arrangements, and the imposing bench from which judges delivered verdicts that could end careers or send personnel to military prison for extended periods of incarceration. The atmosphere was deliberately austere, designed to remind everyone present of the serious nature of military discipline and the consequences of failing to meet the standards expected of those who served in uniform and represented their nation in dangerous situations around the world where American interests were at stake. The wooden panels that lined the walls bore the weight of history, having witnessed decades of military trials that had shaped the careers and lives of countless service members who had stood where Diana now sat. The brass fixtures gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lighting, creating an environment that emphasized the formality and gravity of military justice proceedings where careers were made or destroyed based on evidence and testimony. Colonel Vincent Hayes, the lead prosecutor, stood at the center of the courtroom reviewing flight data recordings and communication transcripts that seemed to support his case against Diana's competence and decision-making abilities under the extreme pressure of combat situations where split-second choices determined life and death outcomes for everyone involved. His presentation was methodical and damaging, building a narrative that portrayed Diana as an unstable pilot who had ignored proper protocols and endangered her entire squadron through impulsive actions that violated everything taught in military aviation training programs designed to prevent exactly these types of catastrophic failures. Hayes had built his reputation on securing convictions in high-profile military cases, and his approach to Diana's court-martial followed his established pattern of presenting technical evidence in ways that supported predetermined conclusions while avoiding any discussion of mitigating circumstances that might complicate the narrative. His analysis of the flight data focused on deviations from standard procedures without acknowledging the combat conditions that had necessitated split-second adaptations to changing circumstances that weren't covered in any training manual or operational directive written by personnel who had never faced similar situations. The prosecutor's career had been built on his ability to distill complex military operations into simple narratives of success or failure, competence or negligence, heroism or cowardice that juries could easily understand and judge. His approach to Diana's case followed this pattern, reducing the complexity of Operation Sunrise to a straightforward story of a pilot who had disobeyed orders and gotten her people killed through poor judgment and inadequate leadership under pressure. Hayes understood that military justice often depended more on the appearance of order and discipline than on the complex realities of combat operations, where perfect adherence to procedures could sometimes result in greater casualties than flexible adaptation to changing conditions. His prosecution strategy emphasized the importance of following orders regardless of circumstances, presenting this as the foundation of military effectiveness. Judge Colonel Marcus Hoffman presided over the proceedings from his elevated position, surveying the courtroom with an expression of barely concealed contempt whenever his gaze fell upon Diana's composed figure at the defendant's table, where she sat with the dignity befitting her rank and service record. His military record was impressive on paper, with decades of service in various administrative and legal positions that had earned him respect within certain circles of the Air Force hierarchy, though his actual combat experience was limited compared to the pilots he now judged and whose fates he decided. Hoffman's reputation within the military legal system was built on strict adherence to regulations and protocols, making him the ideal choice for cases where command wanted certain outcomes without the appearance of undue influence or predetermined conclusions that might compromise the integrity of military justice. His judicial philosophy emphasized order and discipline above all else, viewing any deviation from established procedures as dangerous precedents that threatened military effectiveness and the chain of command that held the entire structure together. The judge's approach to military justice reflected his belief that the institution was more important than any individual, and that maintaining good order and discipline required harsh consequences for those who failed to meet expected standards regardless of the circumstances that had led to their actions. His courtroom had become known for lengthy sentences and career-ending verdicts that served as warnings to others who might consider similar actions. Hoffman's judicial record showed a consistent pattern of ruling in favor of command authority and against individual service members who claimed that circumstances had required them to deviate from standard procedures. His philosophy held that military effectiveness depended on absolute obedience to orders, and that allowing exceptions based on individual judgment would lead to the breakdown of military discipline. What troubled several observers in the courtroom was the unusual composition of the gallery, which included senior intelligence officials and Pentagon representatives whose presence seemed disproportionate to what should have been a straightforward case of pilot error during a routine mission conducted in accordance with standard operational procedures. Their attention was focused not on the evidence being presented, but on Diana herself, as if they were waiting for something specific to occur that would change the nature of the proceedings entirely and reveal hidden aspects of the case. These observers represented various intelligence agencies and oversight committees whose interest in the case went far beyond academic curiosity about military justice or concern for proper application of disciplinary measures to maintain good order and discipline. Their presence suggested that Operation Sunrise had implications that extended beyond the loss of aircraft and personnel to matters of national security that remained classified even within the courtroom setting where sensitive information was supposed to be protected. Among the observers were representatives from the Central Intelligence Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and several other organizations whose very names remained classified, and whose personnel operated undercover identities even within military installations where their presence might otherwise be expected. Their presence indicated that Diana's case touched on operations and programs that existed in the shadowy world of black projects and special access programs that operated outside normal oversight channels. The intelligence officials maintained careful neutral expressions throughout the proceedings, but their presence created an undercurrent of tension that suggested more was at stake than the career of a single Air Force major. Their attention to Diana's behavior and responses indicated that they possessed knowledge about her background and the true nature of Operation Sunrise that had not been shared with the court. Captain Rebecca Martinez, Diana's defense counsel, had struggled throughout the proceedings to present evidence that might explain her client's actions during the failed mission that had resulted in such devastating losses to both personnel and equipment valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. Every attempt to introduce classified materials or reference Diana's previous assignments had been blocked by Judge Hoffman, who insisted that only the events of that specific day were relevant to the charges being brought against her client. Martinez was an experienced military attorney who had handled numerous court-martial cases involving complex operational circumstances, but the restrictions placed on her defense strategy were unlike anything she had encountered in her career, spanning over 15 years of military legal practice. The classification barriers that prevented her from accessing relevant evidence created an impossible situation where she was expected to defend actions without being able to explain the context that had motivated them or the training that had prepared Diana for such decisions. The defense attorney had spent countless hours attempting to navigate the bureaucratic maze that surrounded classified information, submitting requests for security clearances and access to materials that might support her client's case. Each request had been denied or redirected through additional layers of review that effectively prevented any meaningful investigation into the circumstances surrounding Operation Sunrise. Martinez had also attempted to interview Diana's former commanding officers and colleagues who might have provided character testimony or context for her decision-making process, but these efforts had been blocked by classification restrictions that prevented discussion of her previous assignments. The defense was effectively operating blindfolded while the prosecution had access to carefully selected evidence that supported their narrative. The mission in question, designated Operation Sunrise, had been described as a routine reconnaissance flight over what was characterized as contested airspace in an undisclosed location somewhere in the Middle East theater of operations where American forces maintained a complex and often dangerous presence. According to the official record presented to the court, Diana had been leading a 4-aircraft formation when she deviated from the planned flight path and led her squadron into heavily defended territory where they encountered overwhelming enemy resistance that resulted in catastrophic losses. The mission briefing materials that had been declassified for the court-martial painted a picture of a straightforward intelligence-gathering operation with clearly defined objectives and well-established safety protocols designed to minimize risk to personnel and equipment. These materials made no mention of the complex geopolitical factors that had actually influenced the mission planning or the time-sensitive nature of the intelligence requirements that had driven the operational timeline and created pressure for immediate action. The official documentation portrayed Operation Sunrise as one of hundreds of similar missions conducted monthly throughout the region, routine flights that gathered intelligence on enemy movements and capabilities without engaging in direct combat or placing American personnel at unnecessary risk. This characterization ignored the unique aspects of Diana's mission and the special equipment and training that had been required for its successful completion. The briefing materials had been sanitized to remove any reference to the experimental technology aboard Diana's aircraft or the special access programs that had developed and deployed these systems. The official record made no mention of the real-time intelligence capabilities that had been central to the mission's objectives or the classified communications that had influenced Diana's decision-making process. The prosecution's case relied heavily on radio communications that seemed to show Diana ignoring direct orders to abort the mission and return to base immediately when conditions deteriorated beyond acceptable risk levels established by command authority. Colonel Hayes played these recordings repeatedly throughout the proceedings, emphasizing how Diana's voice could be heard refusing commands from her superiors and continuing to press forward despite obvious dangers to her squadron and the lives of the pilots under her command who trusted her judgment. These radio transmissions had been carefully edited to focus on the apparent insubordination while removing the classified intelligence reports that had been transmitted to Diana's aircraft during the mission and provided context for her decisions. The full context of the communications would have revealed a complex tactical situation where standard protocols were inadequate for the challenges being faced and where real-time adaptation was necessary for mission success. The editing process that had prepared these recordings for presentation in court had been conducted by intelligence personnel who understood which portions of the communications could be revealed without compromising ongoing operations or exposing classified capabilities. Their work had effectively removed all evidence of the factors that had influenced Diana's decision-making while preserving the portions that supported the prosecution's narrative. The radio communications that were presented to the court represented only a fraction of the total communications that had occurred during Operation Sunrise, with the majority of the transmissions remaining classified due to their sensitive nature. The edited recordings created a misleading impression of Diana's actions by removing the intelligence updates and tactical assessments that had informed her decisions. What the radio recordings didn't reveal, and what Diana had been forbidden to discuss during her testimony by classification restrictions that remained in effect even during the court-martial proceedings, was the true nature of Operation Sunrise and the classified intelligence that had prompted her to deviate from the original mission parameters established during the pre-flight briefing conducted hours before takeoff. The operation had been far more complex than a simple reconnaissance flight, involving elements that remained highly classified even within the Air Force community and the intelligence agencies that had planned and authorized the mission. The intelligence community had designated Operation Sunrise as a multi-layered mission that served several strategic objectives simultaneously, making it impossible to understand Diana's actions without access to the full scope of the operational requirements and the real-time intelligence that had modified those requirements during the mission. The reconnaissance component was merely the cover story for activities that involved real-time intelligence gathering and potential direct action elements that could have escalated into full combat operations. The true objectives of Operation Sunrise involved the interdiction of enemy communications and the potential capture or elimination of high-value targets whose presence in the area had been detected through electronic surveillance and human intelligence sources. Diana's squadron had been selected for this mission not because of their reconnaissance capabilities, but because of their specialized training in close air support and direct action operations that required split-second decision-making under combat conditions. The mission had been planned as part of a larger intelligence operation that involved multiple agencies and special operations units working in coordination to achieve strategic objectives that extended far beyond the official reconnaissance mission described in the court-martial proceedings. Diana's role in this larger operation had been carefully compartmentalized to protect operational security, but it had also left her vulnerable to prosecution when the mission went wrong. Diana's squadron had been equipped with experimental technology that allowed them to detect and track enemy communications in real time, providing intelligence that was immediately transmitted to command centers for analysis by specialized personnel who could interpret the intercepted data and provide tactical recommendations. During the mission, this equipment had detected communications indicating that American ground forces were under imminent attack in a location that wasn't supposed to have any friendly personnel present, according to the official mission briefing provided to the court. The experimental systems installed on Diana's aircraft represented years of development and testing, incorporating advances in electronic warfare and signal intelligence that gave her squadron capabilities far beyond what was available to conventional air units operating in the same theater. These systems required specialized training to operate effectively and provided information that could change tactical situations within minutes of detection, making real-time decision-making critical to mission success. The technology that equipped Diana's aircraft was so advanced and classified that its very existence was known only to a handful of personnel with the highest security clearances and a need to know based on their operational requirements. The capabilities provided by these systems had been developed through black budget programs that operated outside normal oversight channels and accountability measures. The electronic warfare systems aboard Diana's aircraft could intercept and analyze enemy communications in real time, providing intelligence about enemy movements, intentions, and capabilities that was immediately relevant to tactical decision-making. This information was far more current and actionable than the intelligence briefings that had been provided before the mission, and it had revealed that the operational environment was far more dangerous than originally assessed. The decision that led to the disaster had been Diana's choice to abandon the reconnaissance mission and provide close air support to the endangered ground team, despite orders to maintain her assigned flight path and avoid engagement with enemy forces under any circumstances regardless of what intelligence might be received during the mission. This deviation had taken her squadron into the most heavily defended airspace in the region, where they encountered surface-to-air missiles and fighter aircraft that overwhelmed their defensive capabilities despite their advanced training and equipment. Diana's decision had been based on real-time intelligence that revealed the ground team was conducting a highly classified extraction operation that had been compromised by enemy forces who had detected their presence and were moving to eliminate them before they could complete their mission. The choice she faced was between following orders that would result in the deaths of American personnel or risking her squadron to provide the support that could save lives and complete a critical intelligence operation. The ground team that Diana had diverted to assist was composed of special operations personnel whose mission was so classified that their very presence in the area was denied by official sources. Their extraction operation involved the recovery of intelligence materials and personnel that had been compromised during a long-term infiltration mission that had taken months to establish and execute. The Special Operations Team had been conducting intelligence gathering activities that were so sensitive that even their existence was denied by official sources, making it impossible for Diana to receive proper support or backup when their mission was compromised. The team was operating under deep cover with minimal support and no official acknowledgement of their presence in the area. Judge Hoffman's handling of the case had been unusual from the beginning, with his refusal to allow classified evidence that might have explained Diana's actions or provided context for her decision-making process during the critical moments of the mission when lives hung in the balance. His insistence on focusing only on the apparent disobedience of orders created a narrative that made Diana appear reckless and insubordinate rather than a pilot who had made difficult decisions under extreme pressure with incomplete information provided by command authorities who lacked real-time situational awareness. The judge's approach to evidence admission had been so restrictive that even routine materials related to Diana's training and previous performance evaluations had been excluded from consideration by the court. This pattern suggested a deliberate effort to limit the scope of the proceedings to focus exclusively on the events that supported the prosecution's case, while ignoring any evidence that might provide alternative explanations for her actions. Hoffman's judicial decisions throughout the proceedings had consistently favored the prosecution while placing unusual restrictions on the defense that went beyond normal classification concerns. His rulings had effectively prevented Martinez from presenting a coherent defense strategy while allowing the prosecution to present a one-sided narrative that ignored the complexity of the operational environment. The judge's background included service on oversight committees that had reviewed and approved classified operations similar to Operation Sunrise, giving him knowledge of the true nature of Diana's mission that he was not sharing with the court. His refusal to allow relevant evidence suggested a personal interest in maintaining the cover story that protected these classified programs. On the final day of proceedings, Judge Hoffman addressed Diana directly, with unconcealed disdain in his voice and bearing, speaking about the responsibility that came with military aviation and the trust that the American people placed in their pilots to make sound decisions under pressure. His words carried the weight of someone who believed he was delivering justice rather than participating in a cover-up of his own involvement in the mission's failures. "Major Sterling," Hoffman said, his voice carrying across the silent courtroom with authority and condemnation that echoed off the wooden panels. "You have shown a complete disregard for military discipline and the safety of your fellow service members who trusted you to lead them safely through dangerous situations. Your actions resulted in the deaths of 6 highly trained pilots and the loss of advanced aircraft that cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars." Diana maintained her military bearing as Hoffman continued his condemnation, but something flickered in her eyes as he spoke about the pilots who had died under her command during Operation Sunrise. The pain of their loss was evident despite her composed exterior, revealing the emotional weight she had carried throughout the proceedings and the months of investigation that had preceded the court-martial. "You're not a hero, Major. You're just a failure who got good people killed," Hoffman declared, his words echoing through the courtroom with finality that suggested the case was concluded and Diana's fate was sealed. What happened next shocked everyone present. She stood up slowly, stepped toward the microphone, and spoke just above a whisper. "Crimson Wing," she said simply, then repeated it with more emphasis. "Crimson Wing, October 2019 through February 2023. Task Force designation classified under Presidential Directive 847. The reaction was immediate and electric. Several officers in the gallery straightened in recognition, while others reached for secure communication devices. Judge Hoffman's face went pale as the implications became clear. A Pentagon official was already speaking urgently into a secure phone. Admiral Patricia Sinclair, who had been observing from the back, moved forward with purposeful strides. "This court will recess immediately," she announced with authority that superseded Hoffman's position. "All personnel will remain in the building pending further orders from the Joint Chiefs of Staff." During the recess, Diana sat quietly with her defense counsel while the courtroom buzzed with urgent conversations. Captain Martinez finally began to understand that her client was far more than a disgraced pilot facing disciplinary action. "What is Crimson Wing?" Martinez asked when they were alone. Diana looked at her lawyer with relief and apprehension. Crimson Wing was a classified air operations unit that handled missions too sensitive for regular squadrons. For 4 years, I commanded pilots who conducted operations that officially never happened. When proceedings resumed, the courtroom had been cleared of all but the most senior officials. Judge Hoffman had been replaced by Admiral Sinclair, whose authority in classified operations superseded the original court's jurisdiction. "This tribunal is now in session to address matters involving classified air operations designated Crimson Wing," Admiral Sinclair announced. "All previous proceedings are hereby suspended pending review by appropriate security authorities." The transformation was complete. Instead of facing charges for pilot error, Diana was now at the center of an investigation into classified operations. Admiral Sinclair addressed Diana with respect rather than accusation. "Major Sterling, please confirm your role in Crimson Wing operations and describe the circumstances that led to your deviation during Operation Sunrise." For the first time, Diana could provide full context without classification restrictions. She explained how real-time intelligence had revealed the endangered ground team and how her decision had been based on information not available to higher command. Admiral Sinclair reviewed additional documents before revealing the full extent of the cover-up. "Major Sterling, Judge Colonel Hoffman served on the oversight committee that approved Operation Sunrise despite documented intelligence concerns. His role represents a significant conflict of interest." The vindication Diana had been denied finally came as Admiral Sinclair formally cleared her of all charges and acknowledged her heroic efforts. But the implications extended beyond her case to broader questions of accountability for classified operations. Additionally, Admiral Sinclair continued, "This tribunal finds that Judge Colonel Hoffman's conduct represents a serious breach of military justice. His failure to disclose his role in prevention of relevant evidence constitute grounds for immediate removal and potential criminal charges." Hoffman's career ended as security personnel escorted him from the courtroom under arrest. His attempt to destroy Diana's reputation had exposed the very secrets he had hoped to keep buried. If you've watched this story to the end, you understand that sometimes justice requires more than just following procedures. Diana's journey from disgraced pilot to vindicated commander reminds us that true leadership means taking responsibility for difficult decisions and standing up for truth even when it comes at personal cost. Her willingness to sacrifice her career rather than abandon those who needed help, and her courage to speak 2 words that exposed buried secrets, proves that integrity cannot be destroyed by those who lack it. If stories like Diana's inspire you to believe that accountability and honor still matter, please subscribe to our channel. Because every wrongfully accused hero deserves their story told, every cover-up deserves exposure, and every reminder that truth prevails is worth sharing. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the most important battles are fought not in the sky, but in courtrooms where the powerful try to silence those who threaten their lies.